Welcome back to Cybersecurity Audit Mastery here on Stay Ahead. If you have been with us since stage 1, you already know how to audit access controls, network security, and data protection. Today we move into stage 9, threats, vulnerabilities, and attack mechanics. And honestly, this is one of the most exciting stages in the entire series. This is where you stop just checking boxes and start thinking like an attacker. So you can audit like one too. By the end of this video, you'll understand how malware spreads, how ransomware actually takes down an organization step by step, how phishing tricks even smart employees, and how frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK gives auditors a common language to talk about attacker behavior. Let's get into it. First, let's set expectations. As an auditor, you're never learning these attack techniques to actually hack anything. You're learning them so you can walk into an organization and ask the right questions and know a weak answer when you hear one. This stage builds your mental model in 4 parts: understanding threats like malware and social engineering, understanding vulnerabilities and how they get discovered and fixed, understanding frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK that map attacker behavior, and finally testing whether the Security Operations Center, the SOC, can actually detect and respond to these things in real time. By the end of this stage, you'll be able to audit EDR and XDR tools, ransomware readiness, phishing resilience, patching programs, zero-day exposure, and SOC maturity. That's a lot of ground, so let's start at beginning. Malware. Malware is just short for malicious software, any program built to damage, disrupt, or gain unauthorized access to a system. But not all malware behaves the same way. So let's break down the 5 types you need to know cold. A virus attaches itself to a legitimate file and only spreads when that file is opened or shared, so it needs human action. A worm is carrier in some ways because it self-replicates and spreads across a network completely on its own. No user click required. That's exactly how WannaCry tore through networks worldwide. A Trojan disguises itself as something legitimate, like a fake invoice attachment, to trick you into installing it voluntarily. Spyware quietly monitors activity in the background and steals information like login credentials. And ransomware, which gets its own deep dive right after this, encrypts your data and holds it hostage for payment. And now here's the auditor's job. Don't just ask, do you have antivirus? Ask whether EDR or XDR endpoint or extended detection and response is deployed across every endpoint, not just a sample. Ask how often malware signatures and behavioral detection rules are updated, and ask for proof that suspicious activity is actually being monitored and alerted on, not just logged and ignored. Concept 2: ransomware attack. Ransomware deserves its own spotlight because it is, without question, the highest impact threat you will encounter as an auditor. Let's walk through the full attack chain because understanding every stage is what lets you audit each one individually. Stage 1: initial access. The attacker gets their first foothold, usually through a phishing email or by brute forcing an exposed remote desktop connection. Stage 2: lateral movement. Once inside, the attacker doesn't stop at first machine, they move sidewise across the network, mapping out systems and data stores. Stage 3: privilege escalation. They work to obtain admin or domain level rights, which lets them disable security tools and reach the most critical assets. Stage 4: data exfiltration. And this is the step a lot of people miss. Modern ransomware groups steal your data before they ever encrypt it. That's called double extortion, because even if you restore them back, they can still threaten to leak your stolen data. And finally, stage 5: encryption and ransom. Your files get logged and a ransom note appears. So what does auditor test here? Are backups actually immutable, meaning they cannot be altered or deleted even by someone with domain admin access? Are they offline or air gapped? And have they been actually tested with a real restore, not just a backup job that completes successfully? Are privileged accounts locked down with MFA and just-in-time access? And is the network segmented so an attacker can't freely roam from one system to every system? Phishing and social engineering. Now let's talk about the attack vector that doesn't need a single line of code. Social engineering. This is about manipulating people, not systems. Plain phishing is the mass untargeted email blast hoping someone clicks. Spear phishing is more dangerous because it's personalized. The attacker has done research on you specifically. Whaling takes that up a notch and targets executors, often to trigger a fraudulent wire transfer. This is what people call business email compromise. Phishing is voice based, like a fake IT help desk call asking you to reset your password, and smishing is the same idea over text message, very common in banking fraud. As an auditor, don't just ask if security awareness training exists, ask how often, ask whether phishing simulations are actually run, and whether click rates and report rates are tracked over time to show improvement. And dig into technical side too. Are email authentication controls like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC properly configured? And is DMARC actually set to reject or quarantine spoofed emails rather than just sitting in monitor only mode doing nothing? Vulnerability management lifecycle. Let's shift from threats to vulnerabilities. The weakness attackers actually exploit. Every mature organization should be running a continuous vulnerability management lifecycle, and it has 5 steps. Discovery: regularly scanning systems, applications, and networks to find known weaknesses. Prioritization: scoring each vulnerability using CVSS, the common vulnerability scoring system, so teams fix the most dangerous issues first. Remediation: actually applying the patch, changing a configuration, or putting in a compensating control. Verification, and this is the step auditors find missing more than any other. Rescanning to confirm the vulnerability is genuinely closed, not just assumed. And reporting, turning all of this into dashboards and metrics that leadership and auditors can actually review. When you audit this, ask whether critical vulnerabilities CVSS 9.0 and above 9.0 and above are patched within a defined SLA, often 15 to 30 days. Ask whether scans cover the full asset inventory, not just a convenient subset, and ask whether any exceptions to patching are formally documented. Risk accepted by someone with authority and time bound, not just quietly ignored. Zero-day vulnerabilities. Now what happens when there is no patch to apply at all? That's a zero-day vulnerability, a flaw that's unknown to the vendor and public with 0 days of warning before it gets exploited, because traditional signature-based tools don't recognize it yet. A 0 day can slip right past defenses that would normally catch known threats. Here's the thing: you can't audit whether an organization patched against something nobody knew existed. So instead, you audit resilience. Does the organization actually consume threat intelligence? Things like vendor advisories or industry sharing groups, so they learn about emerging 0 days quickly. And more importantly, do they have compensating controls in place, like a web application firewall, behavioral detection through EDR, or network segmentation, so that even without a patch, the blast radius of an attack stays contained? Exploit techniques. Let's talk briefly about exploit techniques, and I want to be clear, this is awareness level knowledge for auditors, not a coding tutorial. SQL injection happens when unsanitized input reaches a database query, letting an attacker manipulate or extract data. Buffer overflow is classic memory corruption bug where input exceeds allocated memory and overrides what's next to it. Privilege escalation is exactly what it sounds like, going from limited access to admin level access by exploiting a flaw. Command injection lets an attacker pass malicious input straight into a system shell, running their own commands. And cross-site scripting, or XSS, injects malicious scripts into trusted web pages that other users then unknowingly execute in their browser. As an auditor, your job is to confirm applications are actually tested against the OWASP top 10, the industry standard list of most critical web risks, through both automated scanning tools and periodic penetration testing. Confirm secure coding practices like input validation and parameterized queries are enforced through code review. And confirm there's a real process for triaging and fixing what those tests find, not just a report that sits in a folder. MITRE attack framework. Now, here's a framework that ties everything together. MITRE ATT&CK. Think of it as a globally maintained encyclopedia of real attacker behavior built from actual observed breaches. It organizes attacks into tactics, the attacker's goal at each stage, like initial access or persistence, and techniques. The specific method used to achieve that goal, like using PowerShell for execution or modifying the registry for persistence. Why does this matter for auditors? Because it gives everyone, you, the SOC team, leadership, a shared language to talk about detection coverage. A mature security operations center doesn't just say we monitor for threats. They can show you a heat map of exactly which MITRE attack techniques they can detect and which ones remain blind spots. So when you're auditing, the core question is simple: does the SOC map its detection alerts and its known gaps directly back to MITRE attack tactics and techniques? If they can't show you that mapping, that claim of full coverage probably doesn't hold up. Real world example. Real world example, bank RDP exposure. Let's make this concrete with a real world style audit example. A bank. During the audit, three things stood out immediately. RDP, remote desktop protocol on port 3389, was open directly to the internet. There was no multi-factor authentication in place, and administrator passwords were weak and reused. Individually, those are bad. Together, they are a five alarm fire, because an attacker can simply brute force their way in and deploy ransomware straight onto critical banking systems. The formal finding reads: unrestricted RDP access without MFA exposes critical banking systems to brute force attacks and ransomware deployment. And the recommendation follows the same pattern you will use again and again as an auditor. Restrict RDP to a VPN only access model, enforce MFA on all remote access, and eliminate direct internet exposure entirely. Notice the structure here: condition, risk, finding, recommendation. Memorize that flow. It's how every professional audit finding gets written. Hospital audit, hospital vulnerability management failure. Here's a second scenario, this time in healthcare. The auditor requested 6 months of vulnerability scan reports and the patch deployment logs. What came back was concerning. Critical vulnerability scoring 9.8 on the CVSS scale had been sitting unpatched for over 120 days. There were no documented exceptions explaining why, and after patches were eventually applied, nobody rescanned to confirm they actually worked. The risk is direct. Attackers can exploit these well known unpatched vulnerabilities to compromise systems holding patient data. The finding: critical vulnerabilities remain unpatched beyond SLA, increasing risk of exploitation and patient data compromise. And the recommendation: implement automated patch deployment, enforce SLA compliance for critical CVEs, and mandate rescans after every patch cycle. Notice how no documented exceptions is its own red flag. A mature program allows for risk accepted delays, but they need to be approved and time bound, not just silence. Use case: SOC readiness audit. Last scenario: a fintech company that proudly claims, quote, our SOC monitors all threats. Auditors don't take claims like that at face value, so the team checked the CM detection rules, the alert triage logs, and the incident response playbooks. What they found told a very different story. There were no detection rules for lateral movement. Remember, that's a core stage of nearly every serious breach. There was no mapping to MITRE attack at all, and there had never been a single incident response drill, meaning the documented playbook had never actually been tested under pressure. The finding: SOC lacks detection coverage for key MITRE attack techniques, reducing ability to identify and contain advanced threats. This is the perfect example of why auditors verify instead of trust. A confident claim and a functioning SOC are two different things. Outcome recap. So let's recap what you can now audit: malware defenses and EDR or XDR coverage, ransomware readiness and backup immutability, phishing resilience and security awareness, the vulnerability management lifecycle and SLA compliance, exploit prevention against OWASP class risk, SOC detection capabilities, and MITRE attack coverage mapping. Put simply, you can now understand how attackers operate and how to evaluate whether an organization's defenses can actually withstand real world threats. That's a massive leveling up from where we started this series. Next up, Stage 10 preview. In our next video, Stage 10, we move into cybersecurity frameworks, ISO 27001, NIST, PCI DSS, SOX ITGC, and SOC2. We'll break down each one, map their controls to real audit evidence, and walk through hands-on scenarios like testing ISO 27001 Annex A controls and validating PCI DSS cardholder data protection. If this video helped you, hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Drop a comment with any questions on today's topics, and I'll see you in Stage 10.